Roses are red, rabbits are blue. They're actually not, and if they were, they'd probably try to manipulate you into reanimating yourself as a machine after your untimely doom. The Walten Files is a series of analog horror tapes created by Martin Walls that I've talked about before in the subsection of another video. But that's not important today. See, a little while ago, the fourth and final entry in the series finally came out after actual years of waiting. And goddamn do I want to talk about it alongside the rest of the series in detail now that it's here. So I will, and you shall listen to it. There's 4 gallons of glue on your seat, you are not going anywhere. So might as well sit back and relax as much as you can in your situation as we start this massive look through with the first video of the The first video of the series is a compilation of various tapes from the universe of the Walten Files, and our first tape of the bunch is an introductory tape for technicians starting out their jobs at a restaurant specializing in animatronic entertainment named Bon's Burgers, further owned by a parent company named Bunny Smiles Inc. that's a partner company of Cyber Fun Tech. Thanks for the really easy to digest beginning 15 seconds. The only other bit of info we can immediately get from this intro is that the Bon's Burgers restaurant seemingly opened in 1974. To start this corporate tape on a light note, the animatronic stars of the restaurant, Bon, Boozoo, Banny, and Shaw, collectively known as the Showstoppers, get introduced to the viewers of the tape via song and dance, with the 4 singing about things like how the sun's come out with a hat on because it's insecure about its appearance but has been working with its therapist to raise its self-esteem, and wanting to buy a cute puppy from a store, which makes me question whether in their anthropomorphic universe this means buying a pet or buying a child. And then we get into the actual contents of the tape, which there's not a lot of. Talking about what your job will entail at the restaurant, like cleaning floors and maintaining the robots. We also get introduced to the founders of the establishment, Jack Walten, who will most definitely not have anything to do with the overarching story, and Felix Kranken, wishing us a great time working at their restaurant. And so, the short but succulent first tape ends. In between the first and second tapes, an information graphic can be briefly seen on screen, talking about a K9 storage facility located in the St. Juanas Forest in Brighton, which is currently where all the props, arcade machines, and animatronics of Bon's Burgers are being kept after the restaurant shut down in 1974 due to some kind of accident, the very same year the place was opened. To keep things functioning as they should, the K9 facility has been appointed a facility caretaker. Also,
he finally started to remember that all day they will be back for you soon, Sophie.
with those strange transitionary clips out of the way, we move on to the second tape, a cartoon about Bon's Burgers called Little Bon's Neighborhood, made by Sunlight Animation in 1979, which shows how Bon's Burgers as a brand was still alive and well years after whatever accident caused the shutdown of the restaurant in 1974. The title card reads, Bon's Super Sleepover. The cartoon starts up innocently enough with Bon being excited to have a sleepover with his friends, Shaw, Boozoo, and Billy, who? Run that by me again? Shah, Buzu, and I regret asking you to run that by me again. Ignoring that for now, Bon's friends have arrived at his house and they prepare to watch a funny movie Bon has spent all his money on, because canonically little Bon is broke, and the movie in question is of course... The Grinch! They all start watching the movie, but when we get to see what is on screen, the only thing that shows up is text that simply reads, "Let me out of here," as we almost immediately cut to the dead of night with the four friends all asleep. Also, as a side note, I'd like to point out the weird bottle of nondescript pills sitting next to the TV with the name Sophie written on them in the previous shot. Assumedly the same Sophie we hear that grey rabbit mention. Alright, and it says that her last name is Walten? That's probably not important. Little Bon is awoken by... something in the middle of the night and decides to go investigate the noise, only to find the missing poster of Jack Walten, the face I've been making fun of a few times so far, being projected onto the TV, with him being last seen on the 11th of June 1974. And on the floor next to the TV is a lighter. It's Sophie, yet again, having been referenced for the third time in this video, this time in a security guard outfit with Bon standing right behind her. And then, without any warning or transitionary clips, we're thrust into the third tape, which appears to be an archival log of the K9 facility caretaker on their first day at the job. Immediately feeling frustrated about what they're doing day one, like most middle-aged people trying to get used to a new job after the Industrial Revolution took their previous one away, since their facility is unnecessarily deep within this dense forest. After some time, they find the facility and tell the camera that somebody named Chris told them that the place hasn't been working since 1978, which was apparently 4 years ago for this caretaker, meaning we're currently in the year 1982, the latest date we've had so far. After going inside, the caretaker finds multiple photos of people inside the building, the biggest one being of 2 children, the second largest one being of who I assume to be Felix, and the smallest one being of what I counted to be 7 people, with 2 of the people looking like Felix and Jack, so I'ma assume this is both of their families on the opening day of Bonds. Why are these clearly personal photos in a storage facility deep in the woods, and why does the vibe of the tape change completely with the extremely loud breathing and the usually chattery caretaker not saying anything? We then cut to the caretaker exploring the facility and finding Bon in a pretty roughed up state. And as it is their job to make sure all electronics in the place are functional, they start running diagnostics on him. All is going well until all isn't going well, and Bon starts malfunctioning, only for this to happen.
What was that thing?
Wasn't that scary? Yeah, it would have stayed that way too if it wasn't for the fact that we then immediately cut to this. The final scene of the video shows the mangled body of the caretaker saying they can't feel anything and that, quote, "it thought I was her." The it is obviously Bon, but is the her supposed to be Sophie? I'm not too sure yet since this sorry face simulator didn't give me much to work with, but nevertheless we fade into the ID card of Brian Stells, our now deceased facility caretaker. And after a few seconds of lingering on the shot, we finally cut to an image of Jack Walten, as the company introduction tape, the first video of the Walten Files, ends. Quickly before we get into my thoughts on the video as a whole, I just wanted to say that the video we just went through is actually a re-uploaded version of the first episode, due to the original having some copyright issues. But instead of simply replacing the copyrighted footage, Martin Walsh decided to rework the pacing and some of the visuals of the original as well. And this version is so much better pacing-wise, with way more tension and faster spooky moments that lead to an almost delayed reaction as to what is happening on screen. It's great, and I wanted to mention it here since I'm genuinely impressed with how good it is, and couldn't find a better place to talk about it than here. You may continue. Whew, there's already a ton to take in from this singular video alone, which above all else gives us the base premise of the show. The animatronic restaurant Bonn's Burgers was opened up in 1974 by Jack Walten and Felix Kranken, but then an accident likely involving Jack happened during the same year and the place was shut down, though the brand remained alive for at least 5 more years, with a cartoon being made about it as late as 1979. The remains of Bonn's Burgers, the restaurant, were taken into a canine storage facility in the St. Juanas Forest in Brighton, where the broken animatronics laid until at least 1982, when Brian Stells, the facility caretaker, reactivates a hostile and assumedly possessed Bonn, who kills him. And that's all the events we know of for sure so far. On the less confirmed side of things, there's also someone named Sophie mentioned multiple times in the video, with some kind of connection to medication and bonds. Jack Walten and Bonn seem to be connected in many ways throughout the tapes, leading me to theorize that Jack is most likely the person possessing Bonn. I mean, it would make the most thematic sense as of right now. There's an unnamed grey rabbit and a clown named Billy that were mentioned in the videos as well, who weren't stated as official characters at any point, and then there were those strange pictures within the canine facility of what I assume to be Jack and Felix's families. Overall, there's a lot that was given to us with this first tape, but even more that is still yet to be uncovered. That was a fantastic first episode to set the scene. The second video in the series is yet another compilation of tapes, starting out with a cute version of Bonn in a technician's outfit welcoming us to the first tape. Ah, look at him! He thinks he has a 401k! And though this time around the first screen of the video doesn't bombard us with new information, for a split second in the top right corner, a strange string of numbers and letters appear. It's just a YouTube link. Well, half a YouTube link, but we'll get there soon enough. I tried to make it mysterious, it didn't work, it's just a YouTube link, it's just a YouTube link. So, turns out that Felix Kranken, now being the solo owner of Bunny Smiles Inc., had gotten multiple business opportunities to franchise the brand of Bonds throughout the years, despite whatever happened in 1974, creating stuff like their own arcade games and Little Bond's Neighborhood. These business deals had gathered him enough money throughout the late 70s to be able to start up a relocate project at the beginning of 1978. A project meant to bring the Bonn's Burgers restaurant back to life by rebuilding the place from the ground up and reprogramming the animatronics to fit the new establishment better, with the new restaurant aiming to open sometime during the early 80s. I know this picture says 1982, but they don't confirm the year in the narration, so I can't say with 100% confidence that it's meant to happen this year. And we spent the entire first tape exploring this concept. Despite being barely 2 minutes long, this first tape gives us a bunch of new information. Firstly, the BSI Corporation has a file on Jack Walten that was started on the 28th of June 1974, 2 weeks after his disappearance, which, it's strange to start up a case file on your missing founder weeks after he went missing because you are not the police. But okay. Secondly, the canine facility gets confirmed twice to have started being used in January of 1975. And finally, Jack Walten appears twice in this tape. First during the artistic recreation of the animatronics being sent out to the canine facility, with Jack being the driver of the truck, strengthening the theory that Jack is in some way, shape or form interlinked with the animatronics and unable to leave their side. And his second appearance is when the tape decides to start edging Felix, talking about how he only not has a giant brain, but also a giant heart. Only to be cut off by Jack at that precise moment. We then move on to the next tape, which is a training tape meant for future BSI technicians to show them how things are supposed to go when starting to reprogram the robots for the aforementioned Relocate project, using Banny as an example. Various new incredible reprogram mechanics get shown off to us, like blinking, and looking for friends, by which the tape means customers, but I for one do not accept the label of customer or friend, since every time Banny finds a new friend, a face far more humanoid appears on her, which is not a quality I can allow in a friend of mine, and the $9.95 burgers make me turn away as a customer as well. Stop looking at me! Next up is an unnecessarily overstimulating scene of a woman telling us how the mighty rabbit needs to get out and catch the owner's attention, but can't seem to do so and is also starving, which sounds like an isekai title. As we cut to footage of rabbits running freely in the fields with Banny overlaid on top of it. She gets uncomfortably close to the screen, realizes she's overstepped her boundaries, and fades away from existence. And as the scene is closing out, for a brief moment in the background we can see a faint missing poster for a Susan Woodings, last seen in 1974. Looks like we found our Banny. After this scene, we move onwards to the Facility Caretaker training tape, in which a miniature version of Shah guides you through what to expect during your time as a facility caretaker at Bonds. You know, wear your uniform, keep your ID on you at all times, haha look, a dead! And always remember to keep a little man inside your backpack whilst inside the facility. We start getting a guided tour of the facility by Shah, and it's revealed just how big the canine facility truly is. I thought it was just one big warehouse room, but it's in fact a full-blown facility with multiple sections. Starting off in the break room, there's nothing here. As we're leaving the break room, a mysterious shadowy figure appears in it for a split second before we move on to the storage area, housing cleaning supplies, leftover merchandise, and something that makes Shah so upset she doesn't even tell us what it is. Once we get into the next area, Shah starts to
Welcome to the basement. Rosemary would go to the restaurant every night hoping that his beloved husband would reappear after being missing for weeks, but no response until one day she heard a voice saying, "I know where she is, Rosie," coming from the backstage.
And things don't get much less cryptic from here, as after visiting the basement and the animatronic storage room, which Shah glosses over very quickly, the shadowy figure appears for the third time, now with additional eyes, and as Shah bumps into it, the scene breaks completely.
Sophie, where am I?
By the time the lady entered the backstage, as the voice told her to, missing husband wasn't there. Instead, she found a rabbit.
Rose broken will fix you. You will beautiful. You will beautiful. You will beautiful.
When she woke up, she looked beautiful. But on the inside,
Every single part of her body was bleeding out.
I do believe we've just gotten the identity of Shah. See, after the scene ends, yet another faint missing poster appears in the background, this time of Rosemary Walten, the presumed wife of Jack Walten, last seen 1974. She gets lured in by Bourne to the backstage of the restaurant to get killed and stuffed into Shaw. Boopity boppity, that's pretty obvious. But then there's also this shadowy person who witnessed Bourne stuffing Rosemary into Shaw. Who could this be? The third tape is officially finished, and we move on to the fourth and final one, being the longest of them all, containing literal found footage from the K9 facility in 1978, when 3 BSI technicians were tasked to go reprogram all animatronics in the facility for the Relocate project over the course of 3 days. These 3 employees, of course, being Hillary Bioluminescence, Ashley Photomicrograph, and Kevin Wood. Their first day at the facility is basically just an exposition dump for the viewer disguised as a conversation between the workers, from which we learn various things. Firstly, the Bonsberger's restaurant apparently sometimes had very loud music and flashing lights blaring from the establishment past midnight once it opened, though most shook this off as work of the youth. But after a woman's screams were heard coming from the restaurant one night, it only took a few hours for the place to get closed down to everyone except 2 unknown families that went there during the final week of the place being open until closing down for good. And finally, Ashley mentions a strange key that was given to the 3 by BSI that's purpose was never told to them. The next day goes by uneventfully as we skip straight to the final log the 3 made together, complaining about how they didn't manage to get almost anything done with their extremely tight deadline. And I mean, it makes sense. How could you possibly rework 4 entire animatronics in just 3 days? But they're not completely deterred, as with this initial failure in mind, they hope to come back someday with a more forgiving deadline to finish their work. And so the 4th tape comes to an end. Of course it doesn't end there, you silly little shit! On their final night at the facility, Ashley decides to find out for herself what the key they were given opens. Because as we all know, curiosity made the cat happier than ever before and paid off its mortgage. So Ashley sets out on her adventure and finds that the key fits in the door of the 3rd storage room Shah got oh so upset about in the last tape. Once opening the door, she finds an even larger part of the K9 facility that had been hidden away, with a ton of rooms filled with spare parts for robots, and a bunch of animatronics that we haven't seen IRL before, like this one that simply says scrapped, this strange white bear that's not been mentioned anywhere so far, the grey rabbit, and Billy. After seeing Billy, Ashley understandably gets freaked out, decides she's seen quite enough for the night, and deems there is no way she's getting anywhere near that clown before it's dawn. So anyway, she gets near the clown 10 seconds later, well before dawn, as she finds a cassette tape perfectly sized for Billy's tape player, simply labeled 11/06/1974, the day Jack Walten went missing. Another thing to note is that next to this cassette is a photo of the main animatronic gang from June 28th, the day Jack's file was labeled within the first tape of the video. Ashley decides to place the tape into Billy.
Jack, Susan, Charles, Rosemary, Sophie.
That made me uncomfortable. The final scene of the tape shows a Billy's face being taken off by Bond to reveal that the true clown was Ashley all along. Because girl, what about all this screamed, yeah, I'ma prolong my visit here? And prolong her visit she did, since there's some text that flashes right before the end, explaining to us how Ashley was left behind by the other 2 technicians after the final night, as they couldn't find her anywhere and thought she'd left early, when in reality she's still stuck in the cold body of Billy inside the hidden part of the K9 facility. And with that, the Walten Files 2 Relocate project ends.
Shadow Man sees me when lights go off.
During the credits of this video, we get the other half of the YouTube link I talked about before, but I'm not gonna immediately start talking about that one. First, I want to unload everything we learned from that previous video to refresh a little bit. So in this video we learned that Felix Kranken was able to keep at least the franchise of Bonds going well enough after the incident to 4 years later be able to start reintroducing Bonds Burgers the restaurant back into the world via the Relocate project, with the goal of having another Bonds open sometime in the early 80s. For this project, the animatronics from the K9 facility need to be reprogrammed to include more advanced mechanics, and this task is given to 3 BSI employees, one of them being Ashley P, who gets killed and placed inside the Billy animatronic by Bon after discovering that the key given out to them by the company for unknown reasons leads to a hidden storage facility inside K9 housing animatronics we've never seen before outside the showstoppers. Speaking of the showstoppers, through the cassette tape labeled with Jack's disappearance date, we get given 5 names: Jack, Susan, Charles, Rosemary, and Sophie. And 4 of those names are the identities of our core 4 animatronics. At this point, I still believe that Jack is Bon, so he can be crossed off the list. Through the missing posters, we confirm that a person named Susan Woodings is inside Banny, Jack's wife Rosemary Walten is inside Shah, and since Charles is the only name left on the list, he must be the one inside Boozoo, because Sophie can't be possessing any of the robots, but we'll get to why I think that soon. Confirmedly, at least Rosemary got stuffed in her respective suit by Bon, with a strange shadowy figure witnessing her fate, but we still have no clue as to who that could be. You got all that? No? Too bad, we're moving on, as next up we have the secret video that I've been teasing this entire section, that works as a sort of revision of everything we've learned so far that simultaneously teases what is to come, the video's name being Lucky You. Let's start with the description. The story of Bonds Burgers goes back to 1958, where 2 college students had the same idea of animated performers. The names were Jack Walten and Felix Kranken. It took them 16 years to actually execute this concept. By that time, Kranken and Walten had built their own families. Felix married a beautiful lady, and Walten was not only a great husband, but also the happy father of 3 beautiful children. The video starts out with a fairly simple and concise timeline of events that confirms some dates that we've had our suspicions of but didn't get full confirmation on before this, alongside giving us some new info as well. Like the fact that the opening day of Bonds was June 28th, 1974, 2 weeks after Jack Walten had gone missing, instead of his actual disappearance date of June 11th, which I was very confident in until now. The first birthday happened only 2 days later on the 30th of June, and from that point onward the restaurant stayed open for only 20 more days, as the last shows before closing happened between the 10th and 19th of July, with the place closing down its doors for good on the 20th. We then get shown Bon through the boarded up windows of the restaurant on the 31st of October 1974, which I'm not sure what that's all about. I think it's supposed to be like a "ooh, we're still here" spooky moment. I honestly don't know. Nevertheless, after all that, we learned that on December 10th, 1974, the K9 facility was started up, and the robots were supposedly placed in the facility about a month later in January of 1975. And that is all we get. A nice vague recap of things we know have happened so far. But we cannot stay stuck in the past forever, for the future is the only one willing to remember us. So let's move onward to the latter half of the video, which tells us a bit about what to expect from the future.
You must be so confused about what you saw. Don't be scared, my little bunny. Answers will be given eventually, but don't try to solve this puzzle only with the pieces you have so far. This is only the beginning. For I'm going to tell you a story of broken people, beautiful people. He is so sorry about what he did to them, but there's nothing he can do. Remember that. Safety and pills, Sophie. 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 Safety and pills, Sophie.
So from what I gathered from all of that, we are watching this video as Sophie, with some mysterious voice trying to comfort her after she witnessed something and tells her that her safety lies within the pills she takes. This leads me to believe that Sophie might just be the shadowy figure we saw in the facility caretaker training tape who witnessed Rosemary be stuffed into Shah, or some other equally traumatic event happened to her which she couldn't handle, so she had to start taking medicine to forget about it all. This is also why I believe she can't be in any of the animatronics, since last time I checked, the robot like Bon can't even take an aspirin, so we'll assume she's alive and relatively well. I'm a bit more interested in who's talking to Sophie in this video though, since they seem very adamant about trying to get her to take her pills and forget all about Bonds, instead of letting her get over the trauma and find out what really happened, out of either care or malice, wanting her to either live a life of blissful ignorance, not having to deal with the tragedy of Bonds, or not wanting her to know what's truly going on in the restaurant so they can get off scot-free. What confuses me even more about this talker are some of the strange wordings they choose, like saying, "Don't be scared, my little bunny," indicating they know Sophie on a nickname basis, so it has to be somebody pretty close to her, but then why would you want her to take the pills? I'm trying to draw a conclusion where a conclusion can't be drawn yet. Let's just leave it here and say that big interesting, me thinky hard, who could it be? And the final thing I'm gonna bring up from this video is, what's up with the white bear? This is the second time it's ever appeared, and this time very prominently so. What's your deal? And how are you connected to all this? There's a ton of questions that this video leaves for us, but like this mysterious speaker says, it's too early to be able to fit all the pieces together. So let us move on to the absolute final section of the video, which switches to somebody else talking about how they made them beautiful, don't know how they did it, and didn't even intend to do it in the first place, but it happened anyway. To me, this final monologue seems to be from the perspective of Jack inside Bon, considering Bon's continuing theme of wanting to make humans more beautiful through robots, which would indicate that the things Bon is doing aren't intentional, which is interesting. The final lines of the video simply read, "They will see you soon, Sophie." This was the end of the Walten Files for a good while, as we wouldn't get another episode until a whole year later. But damn was that year's wait worth it. And I'll show you exactly why as we start discussing Walten Files 3... The third video in the series is an hour long. Oh dear. We start things out with flashes of the past tapes playing in the background as the face of our mysterious Sophie fades into view. And just like one might have assumed from how important she's been built up to be in the series, she is a Walten, the eldest of the 3 Walten kids. I genuinely thought that was supposed to be a jump scare, but it is actually just Jenny Lettison, Sophie's girlfriend. And together, the two make for the first ever Let's Players of the world. See, the entirety of this massive tape is a recording of Sophie's playthrough of a game called Bunny Farm, which was an officially licensed arcade game about Bonds. Only a few of these arcade machines were ever made, and they were only given out for beta testing purposes, recording everything done on the machines for data collection, which explains how and why a record of this playthrough exists in the first place. The footage was recorded on October 15th, 1982. Jenny is the one who introduces Sophie to the games, and she's not a gamer like us. She's got a job at the age of 20 and shows her how everything works. Sophie creates a new save file, the game boots up, and we're treated to some riveting lore. The showstoppers are getting ready for their annual fruit festival, a huge party at the restaurant where they eat a lot of fruit, I think. Except, oh no! Everyone forgot to bring fruit to the festival, and also that the festival was happening in the first place. Dementia. But thankfully, the friendly farmer of the town, Pete the Hippo, is willing to lend them all the fruits they need for their party from his barn if the gang does a few favors for him throughout the day first. And so we have gotten our main objective for the game. Also, Billy's here too, but the gang has forgotten all about him as well because they're genuinely a year away from hospice. As the cutscene is fading out, we can briefly see the shadowy figure appear in the background alongside a photo of Jack Walten. And something tells me this wasn't something the devs put in the game intentionally. Sophie mentions that the art style, characters, and the name of BSI all sound extremely familiar to her, but she can't recall from what exactly, already alluding to the idea that she's been taking medication to forget all about bonds for some reason. And Jenny clearly doesn't know anything about Sophie's past either, since she doesn't question Sophie's confusion in any way. Instead, she shrugs this comment off and moves on to warn Sophie about how the game is filled with strange and sometimes freaky bugs that she should be on the lookout for. During this gap session, the only notable things that happen gameplay-wise are that 1. At the bottom of the play area right outside the game's borders, the white bear can be seen. And 2. Sophie zones out of the convo for a second when visiting the memoriam of Pete the Hippo's dead dad, probably because it subconsciously reminded her of her dead dad. However, she gets over it very quickly, much like she did with her dead dad, and moves on to the first level of the game, Billy's level. As Sophie starts the stage up, Jenny has to leave because she has an essay to finish, leaving Sophie alone with the game for the first time. The beginning cutscene of the level breaks almost immediately, and we get a glimpse of the real Billy animatronic in-game before the level starts, and Sophie's reaction to this is the equivalent to the mild smile emoji. Did you not see what we saw? The level itself has you finding gift boxes throughout the Bon's Burgers restaurant, with miniature versions of the showstoppers inside them. When opening the third present, the white bear appears inside it. I have a feeling we'll be seeing more of them throughout this tape. The game glitches and changes scenery immediately after the white bear appears, almost as if it's trying to get you away from it as fast as possible. Now you're in this room. Now you're not in that room, but instead playing a delightful game of tic-tac-toe on top of some cabbage with a frog, when suddenly things get turned way too real way too fast as the ripped off face of Ashley shows up on screen, breaking the game completely.
Never mind.
Within the glitching, we can see that the grey rabbit is also inside this game. Sophie has a very understandable reaction to the sequence of events and decides to call it for the night, only to come back the very next day filled to the brim with curiosity. Her save file seems to have gotten completely corrupted due to yesterday's crash, but despite all the warnings the game is giving her, Sophie advances. And this is where things start to heavily distort and deteriorate. Sophie goes back to the dead dad statue, and for a split second the Hippo Dad's memoriam flashes on screen, but the text is wildly different. He promised to take care of the 2 kids during that day. He told the parents everything was okay. It's sad that we can't really remember you, Sophie, but soon we'll be together forever and ever. Rest in peace, the 2 lovely red children. May 15th, 1962 to May 2nd, 1974, and August 22nd, 1965 to May 2nd, 1974. We also start to see Bon lurking around in the hub. Anyway, it's time for Banny's level. The story? She's an idiot who lets loose the pigs of the farm into the farmer's house, which again makes me question the way things work in this world, and for some reason you're the only one who has to deal with Banny's mess, helping the pigs back into the barn. Psst. Hey. Did you notice that Bon was standing behind the trees in the background that whole time? I didn't until I looked really closely at my screen to see what that weird blue stuff was on the trees and continued on to jump scare myself so hard I flew backwards out of my chair and back around the entire globe. There's also a strange man with a farmer's hat who puts up a poster of Jack immediately after all the characters have disappeared from the scene. Some intense and exciting gameplay later. Without much warning at all, halfway through the level, the game glitches once again, and we're thrown into an audio log from Susan Woodings, from the 30th of June, 1974. Turns out that Susan used to be the head technician at Bon's, and she's also the one who built all the showstoppers. In the log, she's talking about the first birthday party at Bon's for a kid named Jeremy, confused in general about why they opened the place after Jack went missing, but happy about the successful party nonetheless. Also, Felix decided to not even show up to observe the party. Owner of the year, everyone. During the party, Susan saw a good few irregularities in some of the robots, especially Bon, leading to her going in to take a quick look at them after hours. I'm sure nothing is going to go wrong. That scene has been stuck in my head for over 3 goddamn years. The complete silence and tension for most of the scene. The fact that you know exactly what is going to happen, but are unable to do anything but watch. This awful noise. Banny breathing after Susan gets placed inside, and most importantly, this image. This is one of the most disturbing photos I've seen in any analog horror ever, because it was the first time in a series like this for me where I got to see the aftermath of the killer's doings, and it looked as horrible if not worse than what I imagined in my head. That's just a corpse, and it haunts me to this day. This is one of the only scenes in the series I wanted to simply pause on and appreciate, since it's one of, if not my favorite scene in the entirety of the Walten Files. Oh my god, it's so good, I hate every second of it. Sophie is shocked from this sequence, as am I, but is starting to connect the dots in her head now. For once, the protagonist of a horror IP is willing to accept the paranormal things going on in their world, as Sophie starts hypothesizing how the game is probably trying to show her something that her pills are making her forget about, which, yeah, the whole pills thing gets confirmed in the scene, so that's good. All of this makes her want to dig even deeper into what's inside this machine. She walks over to the post box in the now mostly derelict hub area, where she finds the tutorial notes of the game. But scrolling past them finds a ton of images from the diary of Linda Thompson, formerly known as Linda Cranken, Felix's wife. Most of the pages are censored, but a few are visible for us to read. October 30th, 1964. Felix has been acting weird lately. He's been drinking more than usual. I'm very worried about him. He came home at 4 AM. He was crying. I don't know what to do. August 23rd, 1965. I know I haven't talked here as much as I used to. This month has just been so crazy. I moved in with Felix last week. He was very happy about it. Yesterday, Jack and Rose had their third child, a little girl. Her name is Molly. Molly Walten. Jack and Felix have been pitching up the restaurant idea with a company that's interested in the project. The name's Cyberfun Tech. December 26th, 1970. Christmas was nice. They built a doll, a grey rabbit for Ed and Molly. Molly named it Rocket. Felix drank up a lot yesterday. This has been a problem for a while. He's a good person, but he doesn't want to address this. It's getting worse and worse, but he doesn't notice. He feels bad about it, but doesn't try to change. January 3rd, 1973. It's getting worse. He's so submerged with their project that he doesn't realize how much damage he's doing to himself, how much damage he's doing to me. He keeps going places only to drink. He doesn't listen. He never listens. I don't know what to do. May 2nd, 1974. Dear Felix, by the time you're reading this, I shouldn't be home. I know you're confused. I'm confused too. What you said to me last week hurt me a lot, but it opened my eyes. Hopefully this opens your eyes too. Our relationship isn't healthy. It never was. I'm leaving Brighton this morning. I know you are busy today doing Jack a favor. As for me, I'll try to build my own life while I still can. And you should do that too. I love you. Goodbye. Linda. Felix, do you perhaps happen to have some Finnish blood in you? Because it seems like you've caught on to our national disease, alcoholism. Not only is he an alcoholic, but also a workaholic who, whilst caring about all the things he does and the people around him, has fallen too deep into these obsessions and because of that, lost the most important person in his life. I could get into this topic a bit further here, and I'm sure some of you are starting to make connections between certain dates and characters, but we'll get there soon enough. Boy, will we get there. Next up is Boozer's level. And we're gonna be skimming over this one since it's quite a slow and predictable section that at the end of the day doesn't give us anything to work with. Sophie gets into the level, plays some mini games, Charles appears looking like he could use some eye drops, the game glitches out near the end and becomes all spooky and whatnot. But I emotionally checked out like 4 minutes ago, so this ain't really even that scary. The only bits of actually useful info I found were that Charles went missing on the 14th of July 1974, right before the final week of Bronze being open, and the title of the level is a Lily's birthday party. And there seems to be a lot of birthday theming surrounding Charles in general, making me think that he and this Lily person might be connected to one of the last 2 birthday parties held at Bonds. Oh right, and the whole Charles Boozoo connection gets confirmed if that wasn't obvious. The more levels Sophie plays, the more she seems to remember, starting to vaguely recognize the people being shown to her through these games and becoming even more interested in finding out exactly what the game wants to tell her. She's getting closer and closer to unraveling the truth, whatever that truth ends up being, and next up on the checklist of unearthing memories is Shah's level. Shah's managed to finish all her tasks already, so she and Bond decide to play a fun and innocent game of hide and seek with us seeking first. A 10-second timer pops up on screen and is done 10 seconds later, revealing the area we can search around in. The white bear appears once again at the top of the screen alongside 2 gravestones in the upper right corner with the initials E and M on them. After some searching, Shah gets found and it's time for us to hide. And you know, a 10-second timer counting down was nothing but a bit boring just a few moments ago when seeking, but now that the roles have changed, this has become the absolute worst thing ever. I hate this so much.
Am I still beautiful to you, Sophie?
I know you.
Found you.
Look, the format of these scenes was introduced 40 minutes ago. I knew that the big ending scare was coming, but because Buzu was so underwhelming, I went into this one not at all expecting that. The only thing that I gathered from that is that Rosemary went missing on the 19th of July 1974, a day before Bond's closing.
Come one and come all, welcome to my magic fountain of memories. Step right up and enter your most repressed experiences and get ready to be amazed by my magic. Let's take a small trip down memory lane, shall we? Tell me, what is it you would like to remember?
So we finally meet Mysterious White Bear. The first thing Sophie wants to know is who the White Bear is, which is understandable, however, I already have the answer for you. They're a prick because they hit Sophie with that, actually that's not a memory that can be uncovered because that is new information, therefore I cannot answer you, and makes her try again. So the next thing Sophie asks to remember are the fates of her younger siblings, Ed and Molly. The memory starts out by showing Sophie's old house, and then moves on to a recording of a phone call from May 2nd, 1974. For the first time ever, we hear the voices of Jack Walten and Felix Kranken, with Jack calling up Felix to ask for a small favor. He and Rosemary are unable to take Ed and Molly to a party at their school later that evening, and asks Felix to drive them to and back from the party in their stead, to which Felix hesitantly agrees to. We then switch back to the Bunny Farm game where the white bear guides Sophie through a corn maze representing her mind, helping her reach even deeper into those buried memories and manages to unlock another part of this tale. Ed and Molly are very excited for the party, grab their trusty friend Rocket the Grey Rabbit to come along with them, and so Felix drives them to school, which we get to explore. Sophie explores the school for a while until she finds Ed and Molly, as we move on to their perspective of the events of the night, looking for Uncle Felix at the end of the party and finding him at the drinking zone? In a school? Bit of a strange thing to add to an elementary school party, but hey, I guess they're not afraid to show the more adult sides of partying to the 6-year-olds of Brighton. The three start driving home. The kids question Felix's state of well-being, and he assures the two that everything is fine. He's just a bit dizzy. You know what's about to happen.
I'm sorry, I'm not feeling too good right now. I really I just want to lay in the bed and go to sleep.
It's alright. We get that today wasn't the best for you. We understand. Everything is gonna be okay.
Thanks, Molly.
They didn't go home that night. He buried them here. He was too scared. But they found a way out eventually.
Later that night, Jack tries to call Felix multiple times after not getting his children back home on time, but never receives a response.
I've been trying to contact you all night. I've been calling everyone for you. But what the hell is wrong with you? 3 hours, you didn't call. I asked you to do one simple favor for me. I need to know, where are they? Where did you... But that's not all, is it?
The white bear declares that though Sophie has now remembered a large part of the story, there's still something she's yet to remember, as Bon appears from the shadows to confront Sophie after observing her from afar for the entire game. And that is the end of Bunny Farm. Almost, we still have another hidden video to watch. The video's name is Guilty, and it contains 3 audio logs from Felix, beginning with a company greeting from the 14th of April 1967, where Felix talks about how he's excited to start working with his new employees alongside his co-founder, meaning this must be the year the company of Bunny Smiles was started. We then move on to a happy holidays message from the 10th of December 1972, where on top of wishing everyone a happy holiday, Felix has a bit of a Freudian slip happen, initially only addressing himself and his own greatness when talking about how far BSI has come, before correcting himself to include the rest of the company, showing his egotistical tendencies. and the final audio log is from May 2nd, 1974. He's recording the log almost immediately after the accident, and he sounds absolutely devastated. He spills everything from his heart to the recorder, admitting how he in a panic buried the children due to not being able to face even the idea of Jack seeing them in the state they were in, admits how gigantic of a problem with alcohol he has, and how he is absolutely clueless about what he should do next. But after this outburst of emotions, at the end of the tape he calms himself down and manages to convince himself that everything is going to be okay. Also, it's revealed that the forest Felix buried the kids in was in fact St. Juana's forest. Rocket, now possessed by Ed and Molly, appears one more time and immediately starts fading away from the screen to the tune of a sorrowful melody. And with that, the Walten Files 3 actually ends. The reveal of that car crash being the event that basically started all this was the thing that got me fully committed to the story when I first watched through the series, because it made Felix out to be a very interesting antagonist. He's not outright malicious or evil, he's just a very flawed and weak person who kept making the absolute worst decisions possible to get away from his problems. He clearly cares about all of the things his actions have pushed away from his life and feels horrible about all the wrong he's done. But it doesn't feel like he's going to truly change his ways anytime soon. And pulling back from Felix to look at this tape as a whole, it gave us a lot on top of that big reveal when it comes to the beginning of this saga, including things like Felix's history with alcohol, the loss of his wife, and what actually happened to Susan. But it also showed us a glimpse into the now of the story, with Sophie starting to get her memories back in the early 80s. With these first 3 tapes, we've gotten a lot of info about many of the events before and after the year 1974, but that infamous year and whatever happened during it is still very much shrouded in mystery, and I feel like the utmost important parts of the story are still missing. However, soon all shall finally be revealed after years of waiting as we move on to the Walten Files. I forgot about Spectacle. On the 12th of November 2023, 3 whole years after Bunny Farm, we finally got something new in the canon of this series onto the Walten Files YouTube channel, in the form of a minisode that was made for a charity stream called Spectacle. It's a newscast from a channel called Local 57, this of course being a nod to how many months we've had to wait for Walten Files 4. The video has a reporter by the name of Christine Marshall talking about the strange occurrences and rumors that have been spread about Bond's Burgers after its closing, and how there might even be something paranormal behind the restaurant's mysterious happenings. So immediately we can gather that the controversies surrounding Bonds were known by the public at large, with the frequent gossiping about what could have possibly happened to the missing people, alongside the place being actively investigated by the police, specifically by a detective named Derek Collins. We also get a callback to something Hillary B, out of all people, said during Walten Files 2. During Bond's final days, there were indeed reports of loud music and flashing lights blaring from the restaurant past midnight, with this continuing until the 19th of July, when an adult woman's screams were heard coming from the building, and the place got shut down. The 19th of July 1974 being the date when Rosemary went missing, meaning she was most likely the woman whose screams were heard on the final night of the restaurant, and that she was the last one to be killed. Then there's a bit of spookiness and Jack's melted face at the end saying, "I'm still here," which, no shit my guy, you're like the main character. And so the video ends. Like I said, the spectacle doesn't give us that much. It's just a fun bit of world building right before we could finally, after 3 years of waiting, get into the Walten Files. FINDJACKWALTENDOTCOM. I forgot to talk about that too. Like websites, right? You're on one right now. Well, so does Martin Walls. Liked them so much that he decided to make his own, called FINDJACKWALTEN.com, where over the course of these 3 years waiting for the 4th episode, he posted various teasers, behind-the-scenes info, and lore-related stuff onto the sites and the various sub-sites you could find in it. Because most of the contents of these sites have been erased throughout these years, I sought the help of the very useful Walten Archives website and the Wayback Machine links it houses within to look through all that FINDJACKWALTEN.com had to offer throughout its lifetime. And here's all the relevant information I found that wasn't just fun world building or BTS stuff as of the end of January 2024. Right, I also took out a few lore-related things that I wasn't 100% confident in that they were canon anymore, because the series tends to get retconned quite a lot and this information is pretty old. So I only took information that I was very confident in that it hasn't changed throughout these years. It's confirmed that Sophie's been taking her meds all the way since her mom's disappearance. Charles's last name starts with a B. Cyberfun Tech was started in 1943 by Jason Poultrick, who died in 1952 and gave the company to his son, currently only known as N. Poultrick. Bonds was originally supposed to open up on June 1st, 1974, but got delayed to the 28th, with the site heavily suggesting that the reason for this delay was Jack's death, which would mean he died days before he was declared missing, but I'm not so confident in that thought. In the description of each Walten Files entry, there's been a tiny message from a guy named Anthony, explaining how he got his hands on the tapes we get to see. I didn't think to mention him until now, since I didn't think that Anthony was anything but an in-universe reason for us to be seeing these tapes. However, on the site, he gets given a full name, Anthony Miller, and a backstory of being a local Brighton teenager obsessed with ghosts and the paranormal, uncovering as many tapes as he possibly can just because he thinks the spooky stuff is cool, but also doesn't watch any of the tapes he finds for some reason. So considering he actually might have some importance in the story later on now that he has a character, I'll add him to the list. Another new character to add to the roster is this guy named Richie, who was a night shift caretaker at Bonds during the time it was open. He seemed to be responsible for the everyday occurrences of Bonds Burgers, taking some kind of leadership role, leaving some audio logs for a currently unknown new employee at Bonds that we get to listen to. And from them we can gather that, on the night that Rosemary went missing and screaming had been heard from the restaurant, there was still staff, multiple people inside the building, which gives us even more options for who the mysterious shadow person could have been. Finally, there's a visual retcon of the iconic handshake picture between Felix and Jack that is now connected to the date of May 18th, 1974, 2 whole weeks since Ed and Molly disappeared. There's also some stuff on this archive site about a Discord user and a YouTube channel that may be connected to the canon of the series, but there's zero confirmation for the Discord account being official, and the YouTube channel has been seemingly retconned, so I'm not gonna take any info from those 2 places into account going forward. Whew, I've been doing that a lot this video. That was a lot to take in, but it was all relatively interesting. And don't worry, even if you didn't catch all of that, I'm sure everything will be tied together during the 4th episode, the Walten Files finale. Oh no, wait, there's one more page I didn't check. The Walten Files will have 12 whole episodes across 2 seasons? This has completely changed my perspective on this fine day. The date, of course, being the 17th of January 2024, which is a bit strange to bring up, except, oh wait, it isn't, since it's the day Martin Walsh announced episodes 4, 5, and 6 will be released within the next few months. What the fuck? I thought it was all supposed to end at Walten Files 4. Right, hear me out. When I started writing this script, I did not think to check whether or not the 4th episode was actually going to be the final one, because it all felt too perfect not to end here. With the near 3-year wait, Martin Walsh once saying the episode would be feature-length, and the fact that the story seemed to only have enough mystery left for one large episode. It all got me to believe that there was no way the series could continue after this. But alas, I did not actually check anything about these suspicions of mine, purely going off of gut instinct, which hasn't even been that good in the past, so why'd I trust it this time? Just like the answer to where babies come from, we may never know. But regardless, we've now arrived at the consequences of that decision, with me looking a bit dumber than usual. Oh well, more work for me and a longer video for you. At least one of us is winning. Let's get into the episode. Starting off with the description, Anthony tells us that one of the last places in Brighton that anything Walten related could be found was an old bowling alley named Starley's that used to be some kind of workshop. In one of the lockers of the bowling alley were the last remnants of that workshop, a case simply labeled Walten, filled with a bunch of BSI related tapes that we get to experience the first third of in this episode. We see balloons floating down the screen for a few seconds as we cut to various images of a spring party hosted in a school of some sorts. I wonder what event this is supposed to portray, when suddenly, oh my god, anemic paper children! So, the 3-year wait for this episode came with some stylistic and tonal changes to the series overall, with this 2D puppet-like animation being one of the key differences, and it looks incredible. I've praised the series for its unique art style in the past, but this refurbishing has elevated the visual quality to not just the next level, but the level after that, perhaps even the level after that. The scene itself is a recreation of Ed and Molly trying to find Felix in the school right before the events of May 2nd, 1974. They find him in the adult zone as expected, and the kids start walking towards him as the screen starts fading to white, only to abruptly cut to a field. Then Bon has a seizure and we get treated to a title card, featuring this strange doll in front of some showstopper cutouts. This very same doll's actually been shown to us before in a teaser for Walten Files 4 called Souvenir, and due to process of metaphorical elimination, we know that it's supposed to represent Charles, which doesn't really make sense in this situation because, spoilers, Charles doesn't have that much to do with this episode. We get a bit of a teaser for what's to come in the form of a video select screen showing off all the tapes found in the episode, starting off with a Bon's Burgers promotional tape. Right before the tape starts, we get to see a diary page written by none other than our dear Charles Brooke, confirming the Charles B thing from FINDJACKWALTENDOTCOM. Apparently, he was appointed as the computer supervisor for Bon's Burgers all the way back in 1970, when the project still lacked a name, though he, alongside Susan, had apparently worked with Jack and Felix in the past, showing us how Charles is a massive nerd, and that him and Susan have a fairly long history with Bunny Smiles and its creators. Getting to the actual tape now, it starts out as one of those promotional recordings of the showstoppers performing that we've seen many times throughout these tapes, though this one has chibi renditions of the characters thrown in the middle of the songs with the animation quality of Walten Files 1. In itself, this section is nothing special, but the detail that caught my eye is how Billy is on the center stage next to Bon and Shah, like he's supposed to be one of the big three animatronics. Files. But despite this prominence in the staging, he doesn't get mentioned in this tape or really any other official promos. So how can he be so prevalent and seemingly non-important at the same time? We then cut to Bon, who stares at the camera for a tad bit too long, like me pondering on the beauty of a seagull who may or may not be interesting just because it's on fire, only to give us a brief glimpse of something censored in the woods and this strange figure in a white void. The tape then transitions into a behind-the-scenes documentary on how Bon's Burgers the restaurant was created, hosted by the beloved Walten Files character, mascot Test7.gif. The white figure appears yet again. Starting the documentary off with the concept art section, it's revealed that Rosemary was the head of the art department of Bonds, responsible for the concept art of the showstoppers, meaning she too had quite a big part in the creation of the restaurant. But that's about all we can gather from this section. Moving on to animatronic design, we get to hear the voice of Susan Woodings once again, talking about the design process of the showstoppers. And that's a face. That's another face, which I like significantly less, accompanied by a strange knocking sound and some text that reads,
Mr. Kranken, this is Norman. I'm sending you this letter on behalf of our deal between Bunny Smiles and Cyberfun Tech, and most importantly, the well-being of our Cyberfun staff. We've been getting a lot of complaints about a member of our staff going missing who was highly associated with you and your team. Susan Woodings has been missing for a week now, and here in Cyberfun Tech we're working as hard as we can to try and manage to get in contact with her. Is there perhaps any detail you could hand us to help us locate our missing employee? I'm going to be entirely honest with you, Mr. Kranken, and tell you I have a ton of questions and suspicions about whatever is going on with your company. Whatever it is, it's making both your company and mine look bad to the public light. So again, if there's anything that could help find Susan, write us back immediately. Thank you. I'll see you on Monday.
So now we know that even the partner company of BSI is onto Felix, and I am genuinely baffled how he's managed to not get arrested by now, when there is not a singular person in his general vicinity who trusts him. Cutting back to the BTS stuff, Susan introduces us to the main thing that makes these robots so lifelike, the Cyberfun Tech console. It basically works as the brains of the animatronics, making them be able to interact with people semi-realistically, move around by themselves, and, most importantly, identify and recognize faces based on a manually created database. That throws an entire jackhammer into the so far pretty smoothly running cogs that make up the Walten Files lore with the possibilities it adds to what could have happened in the story, but let's not get into that yet. The final scene of the documentary shows some throwaway notes made by Susan about the testing of the CTC, with the only interesting tidbit of info from them being that the Bon animatronic apparently recognized Sophie. And so the first tape ends. Getting immediately into the next one, it's a compilation of archival logs made about the testings of the CTC done by Susan and Charles, with them trying out things like the room/face recognizing features of the robots. The way these tests are shown to us is through a top-down camera of sorts, showing icons representing each character in the room with continuous refreshes to the camera that indicate if anything or anyone has moved. The first test, being from January of 1974, is a test of the room recognizing feature of Banny, who, like the idiot she is, bumps into a table immediately, showing that there's a lot of work to be done on these new features. The next test is from a few months later, and at the start of each of these we get to hear a bit of idle discussion from Susan and Charles before they get to work, with them this time talking about Felix and his alcohol issues, meaning that at least the closest employees of Bonds were also aware of Felix's problem, though Charles alludes to the fact that Jack and Rosemary somehow wouldn't know of it, which I'm a bit hesitant to believe. Getting back to work, this time the two are retesting the facial recognition features of Shah, because although the console recognized Ed and Molly, this time it did not recognize Sophie, which could be just a genuine in-law technical malfunction since Rosemary is still alive and well at this point in the timeline, but it is interesting to see how Sophie's recognizability fluctuates between the robots. The connection between Lily and Charles gets officially confirmed, as it's told to us that Lily is Charles's daughter and that Charles is divorced, probably from being such a massive nerd. A part of a YouTube link appears at the bottom of the video, meaning once again we'll be treated to a secret episode after the main course. How delightful! The facial recognition test goes just as planned, and the only thing to really point out here is that the recognition process looks an awful lot like the soy face simulator all the way back from Walten Files 1. So now we finally understand what the hell that was supposed to be. We then cut to a test from the 13th of May 1974, 11 days after the accident. Susan and Charles have finally found out about what happened, and now they too can be added to the We Don't Trust Felix Kranken anonymous group, as they believe that Felix is lying to them about some aspects of the story. Although these suspicions are not enough to make either of them quit, and in fact they end up doing Felix a favor relating to the incident by storing Rocket away in the animatronic storage room as to hide it from Jack and Rose by Felix's request. The two leave the maintenance room for a moment, and suddenly, out of nowhere, Rocket springs to life and walks over to Buzu, whose facial recognition software boots up and, assumedly without being possessed or controlled by anyone or anything yet, is able to see two potatoes heavily resembling humans, Ed and Molly's spirits, alongside a third face behind them. We then cut to the final log, from June 30th, 1974, titled The First. We can hear the muffled voice of Susan recording her audio log just outside the maintenance room. That's currently only housing Bon, Fanny, and Rocket inside the room, as "Who the hell are you?" Holy shit. Okay, real talk, can we give Susan a break at this point? This is like the third time her death's been shown in the series, and the depictions keep getting more and more gruesome. Somehow, Walten Files 4 made my favorite scene in the entire show so far even better. I love how messy it is. Susan doesn't go out quickly with a painless death. It is slow, and it is sloppily done, with Bon having to attack multiple times in various seemingly improvised on-the-spot ways before she's fully done in. But still throughout it all, she doesn't have a singular moment to scream for help. All she can muster are faint gasps. It is visceral, and the contrast of what I just described and Bon immediately afterwards looking at their creation with them "oh me, oh my hands" is so good in the worst way possible. You've outdone yourself once again, Mind Walls. God damn. And we don't get a millisecond of rest after that scene, since we immediately cut to footage of the night Jack's kids went missing, as we see Jack heading to Felix's house to confront him.
Felix! Open the fucking door! Felix, please, I'm worried. Please open the door, please open the door. Felix! Felix!
But Felix doesn't open the door, because he's been at the burial site ever since the incident, just staring at the embodiment of his mistakes in a grave he dug for himself right next to Ed and Molly, which I think retcons a portion of guilty, since in that video, Felix buries the kids and seems to immediately leave the scene afterwards, but that's seemingly not the case anymore. After an entire night of not being able to do anything but stare into the empty eyes of the rabbit doll, he finally leaves the hole, picks up Molly's backpack alongside Rocket, and heads to the edge of a cliff in the woods to throw all the evidence away. He easily disposes of the backpack, for some reason leaves Rocket behind, and is about to jump off himself. But he can. He couldn't bring himself to end it all no matter how badly he messed up in this life, because it's the one thing he's more terrified of than the consequences he has to face alive. He's stuck in the worst possible situation now. He'll feel horrendous for the rest of his life, and there is nothing he can do to make any of it better for himself or the ones around him. And his only way out of it all has been blocked off by the very same thing that led him to this point: his immense cowardice. 3 days after the accident, Felix has somehow mustered up enough courage to tell Jack and Rosemary what happened. The most painful hour of his life. From this point onward, he is going to lose everything he's cared about in his whole existence. His life is ruined, yet the thing that's eating him up the most is the fact that Ed and Molly are still in St. Juana's, and that Rocket is still in his home reminding him of it all. Yet he can't bear to throw it away or give it back to the Waltens.
Make it stop. I'm so sorry. Please. God, I'm so sorry.
And this is where we get into the real fucky stuff. We're back in the maintenance room, looking at Bon working on his latest masterpiece, and as all of this is happening, Rocket's beady eyes switch to the eyes of Ed and Molly, as we cut to that field from the beginning of the episode. We see the spirits of Ed and Molly in this field, discussing whether or not to help Susan, and once deciding she should be aided, Susan too appears in this field, confused and resembling the newly mangled version of herself. In the midst of all her panic, a voice calls out to her.
I can hear you, Susan. I'm here.
Where are you? Please, where am I?
Don't you worry. You're in safe hands, Susan. Welcome to Wonderland. Your new home. Isn't it beautiful?
Am I
Dead? No. Not yet, at least.
Who are you?
Oh, where are my manners? Pleasure to meet you. My name is Bon, and you're Susan. Perhaps I could help you. Here, a gift. Take a look inside.
I don't understand.
That is the new you. A wonderful gift that will eventually become your new body. Just like a beautiful butterfly bursting from a cocoon. You will be reborn. A spirit can't survive without being tethered to a vessel. I know you're scared. I was too, but everything will be okay.
I don't...
Apologies for what I had to do to you. But look, the hard part is over with now. Besides, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs.
Okay, so at this point we ran over the nice and smooth going cogs with a tank. Jack Walten is not Bon. And this melted Jack Skellington proves that. See, my original theory for why I thought Jack was possessing Bon, despite Bon killing people like his wife and co-workers, which he'd never do, is because in Lucky You it's indicated that whoever is in Bon isn't doing this willingly, which made me think that something or someone was making Jack inside Bon do all this killing. But as we've now seen, this new Bon character has their own motivations for killing and does not seem to have an emotionally personal connection to the people they kill, only motivated by the end results that comes from the killing, which is being able to make these people beautiful. They don't feel manipulated in any sort of way. Add to this clear sign of free will, which was my only crux for the Jack is Bon theory, the completely different voice and personality of Bon, and I'm pretty sure that this is a completely new character, and we don't actually know what happened to Jack Walten yet. Then there's also this Wonderland, which to me seems to be a place where souls go whilst they're on the brink of death, to be given another chance at life through this robotic reincarnation initiated by Bon. And that's kinda everything I have to say about it right now, since the only concrete facts about it currently are that it exists, and that only select few people can appear in it, considering there aren't thousands of souls scattered about waiting to be turned into animatronics. Kind of hard to go off of that info alone, and I don't want to get stuck on this for too long, so let's keep moving. After being given the choice to either become Banny or actually suffocate to death, Susan makes the surprising decision to put on the Banny mask, and we come back to reality. Strangely enough, when Susan comes back to life, instead of Banny's eyes changing color like Rocket's eyes do with Ed and Molly's, it's Susan's human body that reawakens, as somebody opens the door to the maintenance room. Before we can see who this person is, we cut back to Wonderland one more time. Bon disappears into the void and the two siblings appear once again, exclaiming that they're saddened by the fact that they can't help Susan anymore. Almost as if Bon got to her first before them, like the opposing forces occupying the same space. But despite their sadness, all they can apparently do now is wait, as the two walk into the void as well, mirroring the first scene of the episode. And with that, Walten Files 4 does not end, since we still have that secret video to go through, this time called Lacrimosa. The video's description reveals how after the game end attempts earlier that morning, Felix went over to a police station to tell a fabricated story about what happened to Ed and Molly the night before, assumedly not telling them about being drunk, claiming that he went unconscious for a while after the crash, and once he woke up, quote, the kid had ran off. Strange that Felix only mentions one kid, but regardless, we now know that he managed to craft himself an alibi solid enough in this moment that he didn't get arrested right then and there, and was also able to thwart off arrest even when the disappearances started happening. Moving on to the video itself, the very next day after Felix's confession, the police go and, I think, investigate the waters Felix threw the evidence in? It's really hard to make out what this is, as we cut to a short explanation tape of how the CTCs work, with a similar knocking sound to the knocks of before being heard throughout this entire tape. We then snap back to reality once more, and get a good few genuinely terrifying scenes of Susan's beautifying, as she rattles around and attempts to breathe inside the costume, with yet another face looking over the whole ordeal, which might be Bon, but that would be confusing since Bon's supposed to be inside of Bon, the animatronic. Honestly, I don't know what this face means, and in fact, I don't know what the rest of this video means either, since next up, we get a recreation of the rabbit is starving scene from Walten Files 2, as Susan walks around the facility trying to escape the seemingly never-ending cluster of rooms the restaurant has become in her eyes, until she finds a TV in one of the rooms with some footage of a person walking over to a camera to cut its footage, as a voice calls out to her that she has to, quote, get further into the woods, and a door to Wonderland opens with a faceless Bon right next to it. What? And with that, Walten Files 4 Cyberfun Tech ends. This entry in the series was not a particularly scary one, but it was fucking beautiful. The decision to refurbish the feel of the entire series and not limit it to the conventions of typical analog horror has let it grow to a level completely of its own, with tension, pacing, storytelling, emotion, and sheer quality most analog horror can only dream of. Hell, I'd even hesitate to call it analog horror at this point. It's just a show by now, and a damn good one at that. With this new style of video also came some new additions and retcons to the story. And I can't lie to you, Chief, I have no clue what any of it means right now. Who is this new Bon person? What actually happened to Jack Walten? What the hell did any of Lacrimosa mean? What is the Wonderland really? How does the concept of spirits and souls work in this universe? How does the CTC play into all of this? What the fuck are you? Will my father come back in 3 years like the series did? All of these questions are in dire need of answering, and frankly, I've got none of those answers as of now. To be able to draw any conclusions, we just gotta get some more information on it all. Meaning that with all of Walten Files 4 still fresh in our brains, it's time to start up Walten Files 5, Faces of Grief. Because the final episodes are coming out at the end of February, or at least the end of March, right? I don't have to split this already gigantic video into 2 separate parts, because if this doesn't get uploaded before May, my entire video schedule will implode on itself, right? Right?